Hi, I'm Dave. Welcome back to Tuner's Workshop. This is part 2 of our plating bench build-out. All right, welcome back. Let's get into the buckets we're going to use to put into this plating bench, some of the techniques we use for putting the heating elements in, and start laying out our bench and getting them ready to use it. So as you know, the buckets are readily available. You can get them online. You can get them at hardware stores, big box stores. For any of you car guys, if you're a Chevy guy, orange buckets are available from Home Depot. If you're a Ford guy, blue buckets are available from Lowe's. There's all kinds of colors out there if you like colors. One of the things that I like to do is keep 2 or 3 different colors of buckets. The different colors of buckets help me visually recognize what chemicals might be in them and what I use them for. So this is the white bucket. One of the things that you'll typically find in the white buckets is that they are food and beverage safe. That's not important for what we're doing here. However, they tend to be a tiny bit more expensive because of that. They don't seem to be built any differently, but I'm sure the materials are probably cleaner, and they do a good job, making sure that they're all cleaned up pretty well. I use the white buckets for my anodizing and some of those types of activities, where I use my blue buckets for the plating, the zinc, the tin, things like that. So that's one way I keep track of them. You can see that this is one of the buckets from Lowe's, readily available, pretty simple. I leave the handles on, however, the handles can be removed if you want to get them out of your way. I have my bench set up so that when the buckets drop in, the handles flip back out of the way. They're really not in the way at all, and they're just real handy to lift back out whenever we want to go use them. Okay, wherever you get your buckets, you're going to find that they almost always have buckets available and lids. Lids are usually separate. You're going to see fairly inexpensive thin lips that go over the top, kind of like a coffee can lid. They're going to be very cheap. They're going to be very thin. They do the job if all you want to do is cover the bucket. But I always make sure that I buy the 2-gallon food grade buckets with a gasket. This particular lid has a nice rubber gasket up inside. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's a nice lip on the edge of each one of these so that they snap down real positively. When you put them on the bucket, you can push down on the center of the bucket. You can work your way around. They snap down. They are airtight when you're done. You won't lose any of your materials out of your buckets due to evaporation because it is an airtight seal. And if you tip your bucket over or you slosh it around, it won't spill. If you use the cheap lids, you have to be careful because they will leak and they will come off if you tip them over. So it's worth a tiny bit of extra money, in my opinion, for the better grade lids. All right. Let's put some heating fittings into the bottom of our bucket, and you can kind of see how we do that. I'm going to do both the plastic glue-in insert as well as the threaded bulkhead for the swimming pool fitting. So you can see I have a bucket. One of the things to consider, obviously, is where is your probe going to go? On the buckets, I like to make sure that I have room to put my handle away from me so that when the bucket is in there, the handles are all away from me. It doesn't get in my way. It's just kind of a nuisance up here. But that's one of the things to consider because depending on where it is in your bench, you may have a fitting in the front, you may have it in the rear, the side. So I like to, pay a little bit of attention where I'm going to go. So in this particular bucket, I'm going to want to put a heating element in the side. So we're going to come down from here. This is a 3/4 inch PVC coupler for slipping two pieces of 3-inch or 3/4-inch PVC together. This is a 3/4-inch PVC to 1/2-inch pipe thread adapter. It's intended to slip into a piece like this and hook up to another long piece of pipe and allow you to go to a threaded fitting. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in that bucket. We're going to use this O-ring for an extra little bit of seal, and that's going to provide us a really, really nice seal and a very small package that we know can handle the temperature. So we're going to start out with a hole saw. The hole saw, this is a 3/4-inch hole saw. It's going to do a nice job of trimming out the hole. However, we're going to go back and we're going to fine trim it with a knife to take off any burrs or any sharp edges that might turn into a potential leak. So we're literally just going to come down here. It's not real critical, but you want to make sure that you're far enough off the bottom that you're going to be able to get this on the inside. So we're going to come down here. We're simply going to drill a hole in the bucket. It's that simple. Not too complicated, a little bit messy. So you can see that we now have a hole that's almost ready to fit our part, but not quite. So that gives us a little bit of room to trim out around here with a knife carefully, so you don't cut yourself, of course. And we're going to put that fitting in there. Okay, so now what we've done is we've taken this X-Acto knife and gently trimmed out the bucket. You can see that on the bucket we've left a nice little radius there, but we want to make sure that we clean everything up really well. Careful not to cut ourselves with a knife. We want to make sure the inside of the bucket doesn't have any little burrs. You can see there's one there. And I have the hole cut just to the right size so that this fitting will snap in there. Kind of tight, but enough room to fit properly. So now what we're going to do is we have our fittings going to go on the outside. You can see it doesn't stick out very far. And on the inside, we have that plastic sleeve. So before we go too far on that, we're going to take this O-ring. We're going to put the O-ring over the top of that. And that's going to be our sealing surface on our bucket. The fitting itself will probably seal on the bucket, but over time we flex the bucket around a little bit, or we push and pull, and that O-ring is going to give us a nice little elastic surface to go ahead and seal on. And then we're going to go ahead and glue the sleeve on and put it on, and I'll show you a little clamp to use. I use this Christie's Red Hot Blue Glue. It is blue in color so that you can see where the blue's been applied to. It's a very fast cement. Does a really, really good job. It's readily available anywhere. But any really good PVC pipe cement is what you want. Make sure that when you're doing these, your pipe cement's not real old. This stuff does go bad after a while, and if it ever freezes, it turns into Jell-O, and it's just impossible to use. So, don't buy huge cans. You can buy cans quite a bit smaller than this. I do, some air fittings around the shop and things like that, and some plumbing around the house with it. So this is about the right size for me, but the Christie's is pretty good. There's a couple of other ones that work really well, but basically you want a good PVC pipe cement. All right, so we're going to go ahead and glue everything together. One of the important things to do, though, while we glue this together is we want to make sure that we can put it in there and we can clamp it up while it's curing properly. So what I've done is I've got a couple of these washers. These happen to be some cool little aluminum washers that I keep around here. But you can use a couple of fender washers from the hardware store. Anything that is bigger than the bucket and bigger than the sleeve, because what we're going to do is we're going to put this on, we're going to glue it, we're going to clamp it up, and we're going to make sure that there's tension on it to compress the O-ring and make sure that we don't have any leaks. So we're going to put the bushing or the washer onto here. We're going to have our nut and our washer. This is our sleeve, and we're going to put it on, we're going to glue it onto our bucket. So one of the things we always want to make sure we try to do when we're gluing anything together is we want to glue both parts and try not to make a huge mess. And that's not always the easiest thing in the world to do. You can see this stuff's fairly thick and gooey, which is good because then it clings and it doesn't run. However, we want to make sure that we can get all the way around the part. If you have your fitting too low in the bucket, you can put the swab on there and you can rotate the part so you have glue all the way around it. In this case, I left enough room, I don't have to do that. I'm going to go ahead and go around here, make sure I have a nice coating in there. I'm going to put the swab back in my container and close the container so that when I knock it on the floor, I don't make a giant mess. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put my sleeve onto my fitting. I'm going to take my washers and my bolt. I'm going to put the two together. You have a little bit of time, but you don't have a long period of time before you get this all clamped up. So, you know, you want to pay a little bit of attention to not dawdling around too long. All right. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we get the fitting in there, get it in tight. You can see down inside we've compressed the O-ring, but we haven't smashed it completely flat. We want to be careful that, you know, we put tension on the O-ring so it's under pressure and it can flex around a little bit. And you can see the sides of the bucket are pretty thin, so they get flat really quick. But you can see it's compressed the O-ring down really nicely. There's a little bit of glue that's on the O-ring, and that'll be okay. That'll help make sure that it seals. And you can see that now we have our fitting in there in the bucket, and we're going to give it about 5 or 10 minutes to dry, and that bucket will be about ready for use. So we're going to go ahead and do the other method. All right, now we're going to put the other fitting in. This is the fitting from Lifeguard. It's called a bulkhead fitting. It is made for going through things like pools, fountains, things like that you might have out in your yard for water features. So it does come with this plastic fitting that's drilled and tapped on both sides for the pipe thread fitting that we need. It comes in various sizes. It does have this nice little nut with that's pretty thick with a nice little flange, and it comes with a little washer. One of the things that I have paid a little bit of attention to and learned is you can probably see that this washer has some ridges on it. Those ridges work the best when they're towards the surface of the bucket. They're intended to provide sealing on minor imperfections, which would be the inside of the bucket. You can see that the nut itself is pretty flat. If you have any concerns, you could probably put it on a piece of sandpaper and a flat surface and sand it down if you want, but they seem to do a pretty good job. The way that we're going to install this, because we drop our buckets in and out and we want to minimize the amount that's sticking out, is we're going to put this surface on the outside with the threaded side on the inside of the bucket, very similar to the way we did on the other one. This can be installed the other way around, where the rubber grommet goes on the inside, it pokes through the outside, and the nut goes on. I've tried them both ways. This way works the best for me. It's a little bit cleaner setup, but either way works pretty well. The biggest thing is make sure your rubber grommet is on the inside. The flat surface goes alongside of whatever flange is sealing it, and the lips go towards the bucket. One of the other things that I like to do on this particular style is I like to, just for a little added insurance, I've done it without the sealant as well, but I like to put a bit of this clear transparent seal on there just to make sure that if there's any tiny imperfection or anything, I make sure that I get it taken care of. You can see that this is a flexible material. It is paintable. Obviously, we're not going to paint it, but it's not a silicone. You don't want to use silicones. Silicones in your chemicals can cause problems, and you want something that's going to, dry a bit harder than most silicones will, as well as have, good adhesion. Most of these types of sealers have acetone or something like that in them that tends to etch into the plastic and give them a very good seal. So this E6000 is something that's readily available, works pretty well. There's a number of things that work very well, but I kind of like the clear, but a black or a blue or anything like that would work fine. But like I said, probably want to stay away from the silicones. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and drill the hole in that. We have a little bit different size hole saw. Obviously, it's bigger. So this is a 1 1/8 or a 29 millimeter hole saw, and that's where we're going to punch it in. Again, we're going to punch it in the side, so it's going to be very similar to the other one. We're going to punch it in. We're going to trim it out a little bit with an X-Acto knife, make sure it's clean, and then we're going to go ahead and assemble it. This is way quicker than the other way. It's very simple. It's cheap, but you'll see it's a little bit more bulky. All right, so one of the things that we want to consider on this particular one, we're going to go ahead and put it in the side again. However, we need to be quite a bit farther off the bottom than the other one. So you're going to have to keep that in mind when you drill your hole, that you need enough room for the flanges to install. All right, but another big mess. Okay, so I'm going to clean this off, pick up a couple of things and trim that out and show you how to put it in. All right, we got parts cleaned off. We're going to go ahead and assemble this. Again, we're going to put the flange on the outside. It's not critical. If you want to put it on the inside facing out, that's okay, or outside facing in. The important thing is make sure that your grommet is on the inside of the bucket. The key is to keep any of the liquid getting out of the bucket, because if you put it in either way and the grommet is on the outside, it'll work its way up to the grommet, and you don't want it to get that far out. So we're going to take the fitting, we're going to put it in the bucket. You can see that we're a nice tight fit in the bucket. We have our nut and we have our gasket. So like we talked about earlier, we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of sealer on the gasket. The side of the gasket with the lip on it is ideally the side you want against the bucket. Now we're only putting a little bit of material kind of in between the two ridges on the gasket. We don't want to overload it and make a big mess. It's just for a little bit of safety. Give it a second to kind of lay down a little bit. If you need to put a little bit more back in, you can. And then what we're going to do is we're going to slip that on our part. Okay, we're going to slip that down. Then we're going to come back. We're going to put a little bit more sealant on the part. just again to make sure we're good. And then we're going to go ahead and thread that right on the grommet. So if you grab both parts, hold on to this, spin the other part with your hand. I'm turning furiously. All right, now we're starting to tighten up. So one of the things about these is you want them pretty close to hand tight. Take a look on the inside. If you want, you can put a quick little wrench on that. But again, it's just like the O-ring. You don't want to overdo it or it's going to tighten it up too much and it's going to squeeze it out and it's not going to do its job. So you can see that inside of that one is quite a bit bulkier than the other one. And you'll see in a minute when we go ahead and put the heating element in that it doesn't provide as much cooling to the heating element. Technically, if you wanted, you could probably cut these off a little bit shorter so that, you know, this extra material didn't need to be there. It doesn't make any much difference in the end, but, you know, if you wanted a little bit cleaner installation, you could do that as well. Anyway, so we'll go ahead and get some heating elements out and take a look at those, and I'll show you how they go in the buckets. All right, so this is the heating elements that I've been using. I looked at several different ones. There were some that didn't seal very well. Had, you know, some issues with a few things. There's some relatively inexpensive ones that are intended to drop into a bucket. They're not intended to stay in a bucket. These I like because they're solid, they're sealed, you won't have any leakage, plus they're made out of corrosive resistant materials, so you're going to get a long life out of them. So this particular one you can see it's 120 volt 500 watt. You want to make sure that your wattage is consistent with what your power source is going to be, as well as what your voltage is going to be. So for example, if you're in Europe or if you're in Australia, you're going to be at 240 volt. Now at 120 volt, the amperage is higher, which gives you the 500 watts. On a 240 volt circuit, the amperage is going to be lower, but the wattage is going to tell you the amount of heat output. The 500 watt elements will heat up to well over to about 120, 130 degrees in 20 minutes or less. Starting out, I'm in the Pacific Northwest, so I'm starting out at around 50 degrees, 40, high 40s quite often. So they can easily elevate it right up into operating temperature where you need to be in about 20 minutes. You can get them in 750, 1,000, and even as high as 2,500 watt. I do have a couple of 1,500 watt ones that I've tried. They're kind of overkill. The 500 watts I like. The 750s would be fine as well if you're looking to heat larger quantities or maybe heat them a little bit faster. But the 500 is pretty quick and it's really efficient. Doesn't take much electricity. So when we go ahead and open the box up, this is what we get. They'll typically be wrapped in plastic, but not always. You're going to get 2 terminals. Like we talked about earlier, you can see that this is sealed up really well. The business end of the unit is all sealed up perfectly well, so that once you get this unit sealed into your bucket, it's not going to leak. It's in there. It's going to heat everything really well. You've got a nice surface area here that's going to work really well. And then on this end, you're going to have to terminate it. Depending on how you want to hook it up to your PIDs, I have all of mine hooked up with quick disconnects so that I can unplug them, move the bucket somewhere else, whether that's on a shelf or move it to another location. However, all you have to do is put a ring terminal on either side of this, and they hook directly up to the PIDs. So if you're setting them up one time and you're not going to be swapping them out, then the PIDs, you can hook them up direct to the PIDs. It is AC, So it doesn't matter. Either terminal goes to either side. There's not a positive, negative, or a neutral and a power on this one. They don't really care. So these are the kind that I really have had good luck with. Used them for a bit now, not had a single problem with any of them. I bought a couple extras just in case I had a problem. I mean, the dead giveaway right here is made in China. So I always end up buying a little extra just in case I have a problem with one. But I will have to say the quality control from these guys seems to be pretty well. You know, this is the bucket that we just put the grommet in, the pool grommet in. And you can see that this is simply going to slip into that pool grommet. And then it's going to push all the way in and thread in. And it's going to sit inside the tank like that. And so we're going to put a little sealer on there and we're going to thread it right in. All right, so we got the other one all screwed in. Figured we'd swap over to this one. It's dry now. You can see it's a little bit smaller. Doesn't really poke out any further or any less than the other one. It's just a little bit smaller. But I wanted you to see how this one goes in and one of the things that I like about this particular one. And then I'll show you the other one. So I like to use this Loctite 515 gasket eliminator. The 515 cures without the accelerator. It does work with the accelerator, works faster, but I like this because it's very flexible and it's very chemical resistant. So we're just going to put a little bit of the 515 in the thread. And one of the important things whenever you're doing this is make sure that you get it in the thread all the way around. If you have gaps in the sealant, you typically will have leakage. These are pipe threads so that they get tighter as they screw in. However, make sure you got your sealant all the way around. It is a plastic fitting, so you don't have to get too aggressive with it. Go ahead and screw it in. Take your another one of the nice features about this one is you have this surface to hold on to while you go ahead and snug your other one in. One of the drawbacks to the bulkhead fittings is they have a tendency to want to rotate. So one of the things I like to do is get my heating element in the other bucket fairly early if I'm using the bulkhead fitting, because that way if my fitting moves, my adhesive on my O-ring or my seal hasn't dried all the way. So one of the things that I really like about this particular one, and we'll try and get you as good a view as we can, one of the things that I like about this fitting is when I put it all together, I have a nice gap, about a 3/16 gap between the heating element itself and the outside of the plastic. And what that does, that allows that area to fill in with water, and that water helps keep all the plastic cool. So when I run the same heating element in the bulkhead fitting will get fairly warm. I mean, actually warm to the touch, where the white PVC fittings don't get warm to the touch. Obviously, part of that is how well the plastic material that they're made out of conducts, but I do believe that, a good part of it is I have the extra water cooling down inside here that helps keep my fitting from getting hot. I've never had a problem with either one. They both work really well. When you're all set up, if you're doing 3 or 4 buckets at once, it's, probably 45 minutes to an hour, and you're going to have all your buckets done. One of the things that you might seriously consider doing, these are pretty inexpensive. Obviously a plastic bucket and a couple of fittings, you're into this less than $5 US. If you have an extra one all ready to go with your lead on the end of it, if for some reason you had a heating element that didn't want to heat up, or you just had some trouble, it's really easy to just take the other bucket, dump it directly into here, plug this back into your PID, and on you go, and then you can worry about messing with the other bucket later. It doesn't interrupt you in the middle of a plating cycle. So pretty simple, easy way to go do that. So I'll go ahead and clean up the bench area, put the tools away, and then kind of walk you through plugging all the buckets in. That's the end of our second video. Thanks for watching. If you like the content and you'd like to be notified when we update any of the videos or we add new videos and new projects, please click the subscribe button. That way you'll get notification right away when we download a new video and you'll get to be the first one to watch it. In our third video in this series, we're going to go ahead and plug all 7 buckets into the cabinet. We're going to turn everything on and heat up some chemicals. And then we're going to go through the kinds of things that you want to have in your cabinet, some extras, some backup chemicals, your PIDs, your PPE, and get all ready for our 4th video. Our 4th video is going to be the shootout between 4 different types of zinc plating solution. A couple of them store-bought, a couple of them are homemade. We're going to see how well this bench works, and you're going to see how easy it is to plate really, really nice parts. Thanks for watching. Bye.